Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Culture Wave Media Network and the Cinema Wave Podcast. We are here to talk to you guys today about Joker, FOLIE A DEUX. This is going to be our spoiler thoughts and review. I am one of your hosts. My name is Darian Scalamoni. I am joined this time by Liz Seiko.
Hi, everybody.
And Vinny Albano.
Hello, hello.
You guys can go to our YouTube channel right now if you haven't had a chance yet to see this film and you just want to hear our non-spoiler thoughts and scores and review. Liz and I did that. That's on the YouTube for you guys right now. But like we said, this is going to be full spoiler discussion, a spoiler review of the film. So if you haven't had a chance to see Joker FOLIE A DEUX yet, you might want to just bookmark this and come back to it, add it to your watch later. But if you don't really care and you just want to hear our unfiltered thoughts about this movie, then stay tuned. We're going to get into it. Let's do it. We got to see this movie as a full crew, which we love. First time Culture Wave movie night.
Woo woo.
All of us went. We have a reel also on our Instagram, which gave a lot of thoughts to a lot of people, including Vinny. A short little better than Megalopolis, which we'll get into later as well. But the big thing with this movie that is obviously all over the news cycle is that this movie's getting torn apart. It's getting torn apart by critics, it's getting torn apart by fans, and it comes on the heels of a movie that was controversial. But the first film from 2019 was nominated for 11 Academy Awards. It won a number of awards, including Best Lead Actor for Joaquin Phoenix, which I believe was the first time a comic book character had even been nominated for lead actor at the Academy Awards, and he wins. We were having a conversation before we even started recording about the comic book implications of what this movie does and what the first movie did. That's another conversation for maybe later in the episode. But the reality with this film is that it comes out 5 years after the first one. It increases its budget by probably over $150 million to a $200 million budget, and it's only made $116.5 million to date. And it seems like those numbers are going to go down. And with marketing, you have to think they probably at least need to make maybe 350, 400 to break even. And I don't think that's going to happen with this movie. But your broad thoughts, you could talk spoilers, Liz. What did you think about this movie?
As I talked about in our non-spoiler, I went in very, very low into this movie. I had very low expectations just from how critics were coming out about it, and just overall for the past, we've known about this film for 2 years now.
I think so.
Right? That it was, and we've known that it's been a musical since they first announced it. I think everybody just had a sour taste in their mouth the moment that they announced that it was going to be a musical. So I went in expecting the worst of the worst, and definitely it's messy. It's a messy film. I don't think they had like a clear vision exactly of what they were doing as an overall film. I think that they could have executed it better. But with that being said, I feel like this film is getting berated on the internet right now, and I don't hate it as much as everybody else is hating on it. I think it's kind of getting wrapped up in the world of like, let's just ruin this film as much as possible, because technically it is very well done. I think cinematography is pretty spot on. Joaquin and Lady Gaga, I really enjoy their performances actually. I think Joaquin just does a really fantastic job with this role. He knows who he is as a character and delivers. I actually kind of like his performance slightly more maybe in this film than the first one, because there's a lot more empathy that I felt for his character. But I think Lady Gaga's character is completely underused. I think that they needed to flesh her out a lot more and not just put her in a box of, you're going to sing and you're going to sing whenever we need you to, but also not sing to her full extent. Like, her singing is, she talks about this too, that she had to train herself to not sing technically.
Yeah, she sung in a different way.
Yeah, which I don't know. I didn't think it was needed. I think on certain songs, like, I got it, but I don't know. I think that they could have just let her do her thing. But I wish that they had given her more. I think her character could have added more to this story and fleshed out the spotty parts to help people walk away not hating it.
Yeah. Vinny?
Yeah, the movie's shit. So I didn't like this film. And the more I sit with it, the less and less I like it. I came out of it immediately like, okay, that was the most middle of the line film And I don't think, like you mentioned, there's a lot of good technical elements, but for that to just be passable and then the rest of the film to just be not good, just thinking about it, it just makes it worse and worse. And even like, okay, I'll start with the positives. Cinematography, Lauren Scher's the director of photography, are beautiful. It's a gorgeous movie. Even I don't know who was the colorist on this film, but the coloring is beautiful, and the use of lighting is great, and the use of color is great. And that's really the most I can praise the film, because the entire musical element is a pretentious gimmick, in my opinion. I think it adds nothing. That's the thing. I wasn't entirely against the idea of this being a musical. I'm a huge Joker fan. I'm a huge Batman fan. And although, in my opinion, I don't consider this to be the Joker of the Batman, because the first movie really stood it to a point of like, this might be the Joker in name, but it's not the Joker in character. But even though I wasn't entirely against it being a musical, like I love musicals, but here, I just, as long as it was executed right, and I don't think it was executed right. There was not a single musical sequence, in my opinion, that I really thought was enjoyable. Maybe, except for the prison scene where Harley sets the prison on fire and they're dancing under the rain. It has its moments of sparkle, but every other musical sequence, in my opinion, is so devoid of life. Like, if you're going to make this a musical, at least make it more imaginative. Every single musical sequence was either just shot in close-up of the two of them, and the songs here are just renditions of famous songs from the past, and I don't think they're exciting at all. It's just boring, honestly. It's just boring. Like, why are you you have unlimited potential here. You could do crazy stuff, but we decide to shoot it where Harley is, they're talking through the glass. Nothing is happening except for them just going da 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 da, and then Arthur da 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 da, right?
That's my favorite interpretation.
So and it happens multiple times on the phone.
Yeah.
Da 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 da.
It's very
like
chill.
It's not imaginative, and even the scenes that are imaginative don't exist within the plot at all. They exist within Arthur's dream world. They don't progress the plot. We learn nothing. Usually in a musical, you have these brilliant orchestrated sequences where it progresses the plot or we learn more of the character, but we already know what the character is feeling at that time. And then it cuts to a musical sequence that breaks all tension, and it's for Arthur to just be like, I am sad, I am sad, I am sad. Oh, I'm in love. We already know you are. Like, the song does nothing. And even like I said, going to my train of thought of like, even when the film wants to be imaginative and they do have those musical sequence in Arthur's head, it's cool. The scene with the judge and he's like slamming the judge like head in and like, but it kind of felt just the same after a while. It felt very redundant. Like, even the art direction, every single one of those sequences opens up from a fade from black. And it's like the camera's not really that exciting. The lighting is cool, I'll admit to that. But other than that, like, how many times can we have a art poppy background, like an art deco-esque background, and then just have Joaquin and Gaga just kind of floating around? And yeah, sorry, my very long-winded answer, I apologize. But yeah, I wasn't against it being a musical, but it didn't prove its point of being a musical. And even when it comes to the writing, I don't think the court scenes were that tense. They weren't filled with that much tension. And it ignores basically the nothing happens. Nothing like nothing happens. What are we doing the entire movie? We're just recounting the events of the first movie.
It's true.
We've already seen the first movie. We don't need it to be told to us again. And then by the end of it, he dies. Yeah.
Okay. There's a lot there. There's a lot to chew on.
Sorry.
DJ, hit us with your
I want
thoughts.
to start. I want to start with the way that you kind of after you said the movie was shit. How you said, because the musical element is a big part of it. Not only in the identity and the DNA of what this movie is, but the aura surrounding this film.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing is what Vinny said. I think that I'm also somebody that likes musicals. Like, I'm not opposed to musicals. I go to the theater to see musicals, even when I know that it is a musical. Even though there's this trend in Hollywood right now that they want to hide that certain things are musicals because some people are growing tired of them. Announcing that this film was going to be a musical, I'm not going to say was a mistake, but I think the problem is that if it was a musical that was enjoyed by people, then it would help the movie.
Wait, so you think that they should have kept it a secret?
I just don't know if it was the right direction for this in general, but if they were going to go that way, like, it's not executed the right way. Is like the same way that I think Vinny said it. Like, it's not that I'm opposed that the movie is a musical. It's just that there is not enough appealing nature to the musical sequences and the decision on how to structure the story surrounding the musical elements of it that make it enjoyable. I think that it actually, like I said, I disagree with what Vinny was saying in terms of there not being tension. I think there are moments, and it's in particular in the courtroom sequences and in the interview that he has with Steve Coogan's character in Arkham. I think there are moments where you start to see these, when Arthur stops taking his medicine, and you start to see these delusions of grandeur, and you start to see all these insane things, but then they'll cut the tension that they built in the first movie with a musical sequence, and it doesn't work. Also agreeing with what Vinny said, they totally did retread a lot of the things that came with the first movie. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Todd Phillips didn't know what to do with this movie. And it was a movie that grossed almost 10 times its budget the first time around. And Warner Brothers, I think, was like, we need to capitalize on this. We need a sequel to this movie. I mean, at the end of the first film, and we can get into this if you guys want, but it's a big thing now looking back to know that at the end of the first film you have this reveal, and it is like he sings "That's Life" to the therapist, maybe alluding to wanting to have maybe one or two musical sequences in the first film, which you have. I mean, this scene in front of the mirror where it's like kind of a ballet and the music plays a big part of it. But by the end of that first movie, you are basically seeing the transformation from Arthur Fleck to Joker. And this movie decides to start over. For fans that already saw that story unfold, and now Todd is trying to do it in a different way. And I really think, now you use the word pretentious, I think it's more so that, and I don't have all the answers, but I think that the studio wanted something to be made. And Todd partly was like, this is my opportunity to do something I've never done before. At the same time, fucking the studio. Because I don't think that he had any idea what was going to come of this movie, even when he started filming.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they thought this was going to work. And it's not that the sequences aren't sometimes well done. It's not to say that, again, I think, which you didn't touch upon the acting, Vinny, which I'm curious when we get back around to you, but like, I agree with what you were saying. I think Joaquin is fantastic in this movie. I think Gaga is good in this film. I think she's underwritten, and I think that it's a big part of the problem in terms of the relationship between Harley and Joker is never really established in this movie. Like the deeper relationship of what they could be, because her character is like a walking contradiction, which I don't think is necessarily her fault. I think that the writing isn't strong enough in this film. And the writing in the first film is kind of simple. It's more of like a psychological viewpoint of who Arthur is. And I think there's good side characters, but I think overall this movie's just very messy and it can't find out what it wants to be, even through a 2-hour and 18-minute runtime.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a lot to talk about with this film.
There's tons
I
to
think
talk about
when
with
you're comparing the first one and the second one, For me, it's what do you walk away kind of feeling or overall thinking about with a film? The first one, I personally think that Todd Phillips did not intend for the first film to be taken on such a scale that people took it on, of a commentary on a lot of things.
Mhm.
People took the first Joker film as a commentary on like nature versus nurture, about like the rioting of against society and against structure, and then also how the like structure of the world is failing people that need help, and especially a commentary on mental illness. I don't think Todd Phillips intended when he was writing that initial film for any of that to really come out. I think he wanted to just make a psychological thriller and just happened to throw in like the character of the Joker because he was like, this will be a cool element, and kind of what we talked about before, he'll connect an IP in order to get the funding for it. I think once he saw the first reaction to the first film, he realized that if he was going to make a second one, he needs to talk more about these big conversations and try to bring these elements into it more. Which for me, walking out, I mean, it kind of he hits it right on the nose with the opening sequence, which is this like Looney Tune cartoon. I don't even know if it's like an original cartoon or if it's something that they made.
You're talking about the opening of the film.
Yes.
The Me and My Shadow.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they made it for the movie.
They made it for, which for me, he's showing his cards right there of this film is going to be about the Joker versus Arthur. And is Arthur actually the Joker? And then also at a certain point, when you are labeled as something in the world, when does it come to a point of if you want to continue with that label, or are you just forever that label because the world has now associated you with it? Because at a certain point for me in this film, it became less about convincing Arthur if he's the Joker or not, or even the jury, but more about the world and the people that are rioting outside of the courthouse that are just seeing him as this person. And then you also get it with Harley Quinn at the end of the day, where she's like, no, you're not Arthur, you're the Joker. And so I think he was trying to have the audience walk away with this question of like, what does society label you versus who you really are? But it just didn't land, because I don't know if there was enough for this story to like unfold in order to tell that big weighted theme.
I think you did a better job of explaining the theme and the maybe vision of what Todd Phillips wanted to do, and little bit that he did on the grandest scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what bothers me so much about the articulation and the structure of what he was trying to do with this movie. It's frustrating, and I don't like. I agree. Like, I think that the first movie took off in a place where he didn't. I think in theory he was like, yeah, I need to attach this to an IP so I can make a movie of this scale. Even for, I mean, the first movie, again, for reference, the first movie had a budget between $55 and $70 million. This movie had between 190 and 200 million. There is no world in which a movie of this nature should be made for that amount of money. I know you're not big into the IP worlds, but like this has been a constant problem now recently, where like The Acolyte, which was a Star Wars show, was made for $230 million. Insanity. That's a television show. The Marvels was made for $360 million. That's insane. The movie barely grossed $150 million.
But like, so I wonder how much Joaquin asked for, because I just saw that somebody said that Joaquin in all of his career has never done a sequel.
Which is
this
true.
This is his first sequel ever. So like, what if he was just like, I need all the money that you can possibly get to make me do this?
Well, the initial thing too was that when asked about when the reception of the first film came out, he goes, I would never do a sequel ever, and I would never do a sequel to the first movie unless Todd was involved. So it had to be a joint thing. And Todd Phillips, I do think, had maybe different intentions with this. There's conflicting reports that he wanted to make a DC Black Label, which would just be these darker DC comic stories in a more grounded setting, like the first Joker.
Okay.
But then there's contradictory reports that Warner Brothers is the ones that wanted to do that, and Todd just wanted to do a one-off thing and did it to get the movie greenlit. It gives me even more reason why was this made. And I think the other thing, like I'm again, for the people who may not know Todd Phillips' filmography, let's go through this because I think this is what makes this guy really interesting as a director, and it's just confusing as all hell. He's best known before Joker for making the Hangover franchise. Okay? Now, the first Hangover is arguably one of the funniest movies of the last 20 years. A lot of people thought that. It was critically adored. It was the return to comedy. Hangover 2 was terrible. It was panned by critics. Fans hated it. And then he went and made a third one because, again, money talks. Nobody went and saw the third one. And then he decided to do a little movie called War Dogs. And War Dogs did pretty well. And it put Jonah Hill in a different role. And then he was stuck. He had nowhere to go. So he made Joker. Now, Joker and The Hangover are two good original movies. This guy shouldn't be doing sequels. I don't think he has ideas for sequels. I don't think he had any intention of doing this movie ever. And I think the problem with this is that, according to a report too, this story came to Joaquin Phoenix in a dream. Maybe true. Do you hinge $200 million on a dream of your lead actor? I don't think so. It's a mess. I think the movie fundamentally is a mess. And that's on top of the fact that there are technical good aspects about it. The cinematography, as you guys have both alluded to. I am curious on your thoughts on the performances because, and I'm curious, like, for people who may not know your thoughts on maybe Joaquin in the first movie, if you thought he did a good job in the first film in comparison to this one and just in general, Vinny.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the cast does a great job, but here's my problem. But that's the thing though, is that Liz, you brought up the point of the theme of the true character versus the label that society puts on the character. And they allude to this theme, and then by the end of the film, he's like, yep, Joker never existed. There's no Joker. But I don't think there ever was any Joker in any of this film. And that's where I think, although I think it's a problem with the direction rather than Joaquin's performance, but even when he is quote unquote the Joker, he is like not intimidating at all. It feels like that gravitas that was in his performance of the first film is just vacant here completely. Like, he's in the makeup and yet it doesn't feel like he's in the makeup, right? He's just kind of all over the place. Like, it feels like he's still Arthur, which might be the point, like you were saying, Liz. But at the same time, it's just not. It feels like this is not a sequel. Like, in the first film sets this entire character up of like, this is the Joker personality. He's become the Joker, and by the end of the first film, there's so much raw violence within Arthur that is never here at all anymore. And also the fact that I lost my train of thought. But yeah, I mean, I don't have an issue with the performances. I think it's really up to the direction and the way the characters were written. Especially Harley, right? Because I think Gaga does a good job of what she has. But Harley, we've seen better interpretations of Harley. This is a very different interpretation of Harley. But the fact that the other interpretations are better just kind of speaks to it, because her character by the end of this feels vacant. It feels like there could have been more nuance, but we don't really learn much, right? And also, while I'm on this train of thought, there's a lot of other sections of the film where I feel that same thought applies, like the mental illness. In my opinion, I think that the film doesn't do a good job at displaying mental illness, because it should be a nuanced thing, but we are not really learning much compared to the first film. Like I said, like this film does not progress anything past what happened in the first film. You know, that might be the point, but that's also like saying like, oh, Megalopolis was supposed to be shit. Like it's good because it was supposed to be shit, right?
I think going off the mental illness part of it too, I actually think the only part that you feel that actually isn't through Arthur's character at all. It's through Gary Puddles' character in the courtroom, where he basically paints this portrait of like, Arthur, I am now in fear of you. And you were the only person that he says, you're the only one that was ever nice to me. Do you know what it's like to feel that like now, like I look at you and I am afraid? And it's like pointing a microscope on Arthur as a human being and as a character as being this person who has become exactly what he was afraid of and what he disliked. And the problem with that scene is that it gets broken up by a musical number. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that like, this movie's so interesting for so many reasons. The DC thing is another just aspect of it. Like Todd Phillips, the DC's logo is not featured in the movie. That means something. He didn't want to, apparently in the reports, Todd Phillips wanted nothing to do with DC Brass. He didn't want to be attached to having anything, and he carved out his own, in doing the sequel, he carved out his own, like, I have essentially final cut or oversight into like what I want to do with this movie. And maybe that is pretentious in and of itself, but at the same time, there's another side of it where you could be like, well, yeah, this guy made your studio an insane amount of money based on him making a grounded psychological thriller akin to Taxi Driver and The King of Comedy, because the movie's very much a tribute to Martin Scorsese and early 70s and 80s cinema. And that movie probably at best makes 100 million at best if Joker is not attached to it. So it's interesting. I think that, yeah, I don't know. It's hard because there are things to like about this movie, but I think it's such a mess, and I don't know if like I'll ever return to it and learn more. And I do think that it's sad to think that they tried to just retread a lot of what they tried to do in the first movie and have a full-fledged story and identity with who Arthur Fleck was and who he became, to now do it in a different way through the vein of love with Harley through music in a jukebox musical, because that's what it is. It's not, there's no originality to any of the musical sequences. So
I think it comes down to just execution, because on paper, I mean, even like the film's title, Folie à Deux, it in French, it literally means madness of two. And so I think that just they needed to go back to the plot and figure out the beats to figure out, okay, what are we working toward, and like how are we working toward it. I just keep thinking that if they were to able to keep the momentum of what that first musical number was, of when Arthur is seeing himself like on TV and they're asking him like, how are you feeling, and he breaks out into song, and then cut, you realize he wasn't actually singing, it was just all in his mind. I love that. I think that really shows the element of mental illness and how sometimes they can't always express how they're feeling, but while they might look like something's happening, but in their mind something completely different is happening to them. And so I think if they could have explored that more and not made it so, I don't know, polished, I guess, because a lot of the musical pieces for me are just too polished, which kind of bleeds into the element of Lady Gaga. I loved her in this. I think that it was a smart choice to cast her, but I don't think if you're going for the gritty singing, maybe she shouldn't have been cast, because for me, I just kept getting distracted of being like, oh, this is Lady Gaga trying to sound like she can't sing, which for me is just not needed. Like that's attention being put on something that is not needing attention. And I also wish that they had, I don't know, I just keep thinking that one sequence when they're trying to escape from the jail, what a wild movie it would have been if they actually did escape from the jail and the whole film is just them living in these like delusional, like fucked up musical moments while they're trying to stay on the loose. And
That would be more interesting than the
way
movie
more
we got.
interesting this, because
Yeah.
for me, I think DJ, you said you enjoyed the courtroom scenes. For me, it felt very redundant, like you said, Vinny, about just repeating information that we already saw in the first film. Like, we know everything that they've said because we literally watched it happen a couple of years ago. But then you bring in the whole Gaga element, and for me, her character is just lacking motivation. Like, okay, we get it. She put herself into an asylum. She now is upset because Arthur admitted that he's not Joker. Got it. But why? Why is she doing any of this? What is she working toward? Because she wants to be known as like Mrs. Joker? Okay, then show us a little bit of her past and why she's getting to this point in her life. I just felt like they only used her as a the stake in the sand of anytime Gaga starts talking, prepare for a music number. And instead they could have shown a whole other element of, okay, why are their characters connecting? Like, what actually makes them similar, which I loved in the beginning. And then they ripped it out from underneath us of saying like she lied this whole time.
Yeah.
Why did her character lie?
I thought the most compelling scene with her was the first scene where they kind of meet.
Yeah.
And like, that's, I think so much, I said this in the non-spoiler, I just think there's 3 different movies in here.
Mhm.
I don't know why he didn't decide to take one path. Like, again, if you were gonna, like you said, that what you brought up in the escape or potential escape sequence, like, if you're gonna go balls to the wall music, go balls to the wall musical. Like,
where they're on the run.
Yeah,
give us an on the run like Joker and Harley
you
musical.
you could do like a Bonnie and Clyde Joker and Harley
Absolutely
musical, and I think it could have been. I also again wish they had a little bit more original music, because that, I think, changed a little bit. Like, I think that,
well, they had the budget for it.
that's what I'm
They had the
saying. Like,
budget for
$200
original
million
music.
for this movie is just crazy to me. It's so crazy to me. I don't know if I have much else to say. I feel like
I thought it was funny in like a
there
weird
are moments.
way.
There were moments that were. I mean, the first movie, like, I mean, I didn't. The first movie's dark. Like, the first movie's very dark.
Well, I forget who I was talking. Maybe it was you, Vinny, or maybe it was Mark. But after we saw it, I was like, I was laughing a lot in this film, and we talked about how the first one you laugh, but then you're kind of like, ooh, maybe I shouldn't be laughing at this. Like, this is very heavy. Or should I be laughing at this? The second one, I was full on just like, what's going on?
Oh yeah,
right
and
now?
our
I
audience was too. There were
Yeah,
definitely
very.
there were definitely moments where the audience was like, "That's actually funny. What's
That's
happening?
actually
What's
funny.
saying?"
It's not like
Please
dark humor.
don't sing.
Don't
don't
sing.
sing. Don't sing. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of what we're saying kind of, you just enjoyed it a little bit more, but I think we all agree that the execution was not 100% of what it could and should have been for this movie, and it leans to be a lot more mixed in its reception. I think we're all gonna have different scores though, and I think there's levels of dislike we have for this movie. I think that, like, I'll most likely maybe watch this movie one more time in my life and then never watch it again. I think I'll return to the first Joker maybe a few times in my life. I feel like you'll definitely never see it again. And I don't know about you. Maybe you will decide to watch it again, but I don't think it's one that you overly.
I'll only
loved
watch the musical
either.
parts.
Of
No,
course.
could you
Of
imagine?
Well, you love musicals, so that makes sense.
I appreciate them.
Yes.
Yeah,
But
more than some of the public does. Some of the public, it's like stamped like,
well, that's what. Yes.
boo, musicals, we hate them.
I think a mixture between that and, which you spoke to a little bit about, was that it's kind of sticking the middle finger to DC in general, and the integrity of what the severity of what the Joker means, like, to comic book fans and to iconography and symbolism to society, and like it's like he's Darth Vader. Like, it's the same sort of thing. It's just he's a twisted character, but there's only a certain amount of characters in pop culture that have been played by multiple people. The Joker is one of those people, and there's different interpretations on how to do the character between Jack Nicholson and Cesar Romero and Heath Ledger and Jared Leto and Joaquin Phoenix. They're all very different for all different reasons. Are we ready for scores?
I'm ready.
Yeah?
I'm ready.
Okay, I want yours first.
Okay. So I'll prep because I feel like I was very a negative Nancy throughout this review, because I don't like this movie. I don't think it's a good movie, but I don't think it's offensively bad. But it's just so mediocre that it makes it even worse. You get what I mean? Like when there's when everything is when things are bad and the things that are good are just passable, it's I feel like that just makes it worse because there's nothing to grab onto. There's nothing to like be like, oh my god, like, or you know what I mean. So sitting with my thoughts, and Liz, that idea of like having a Bonnie and Clyde runaway, that sounds so much more exciting than this. Like we never leave Arkham and we never leave the courtroom, and yet this is a $200 million movie. Like, come on. And also like we get glimpses of like, holy shit, something might happen. Like there's Joker terrorists who view him as a martyr and they blow up the courtroom, and then
we didn't even talk about the ending of the movie.
Yeah.
I just
No,
realized that.
Yeah, and then that's it. And then that's it. And then he gets killed in prison, and then like the new Joker forms, right? Which I will say that was my theory.
You thought that was gonna happen the whole time?
I knew that was gonna happen.
Oh,
I
okay.
literally went into this film because, like I said I'll get to my score in a second, but I gotta be proud of myself because I knew he was gonna get killed by someone in Arkham, and then that was gonna be the Joker. Like I literally predicted it because I said that at the beginning of this review. Like I never viewed this as Batman's Joker, just Joker in name.
Yeah,
And
like a symbol of what Joker stands for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, by the end of this film, I know there's gonna be someone that views him almost as like an inspiration to then become the clown prince of crime. And that's my and
that's what happened.
Yeah,
That's what happened, Vinny.
Yeah,
Claps for Vinny.
Yeah, but it's still like an.
Did you like it though? Did you enjoy the ending, or you thought that it was very gimmicky and?
Well, I think that's the problem is that like even though it confirmed a theory and I was like, ooh, okay, cool, right? But it's not satisfying because by the end of the film, like I've been kind of ranting about this entire review, we're not progressing anything with the Arthur character or what this film tries to make it out to be, like a split personality, neither the Joker character. So his death feels like a real just sour note, right? He could die at the end of the film. Like I'm not saying that characters are supposed to go, like he could have died and that would have been fine as long as it became justified, as long as we saw a progression with his character. But there really is no progression with his character throughout this entire film.
Yeah, you feel
and it just
nothing
rewrites
you
everything from the first film.
You feel nothing when he dies.
Yeah.
I think it felt like a gimmick. I mean, and they have literally the actor stick the knife in his mouth and try to allude to Heath's version of Joker, which I don't like. Like, I just don't like it. Like, Heath played it a certain way. In my opinion, Heath will always be the best Joker, and they should have just kept it there. They didn't need to show the origin of how he became the Joker, and it's not connected at all.
Mm-hmm.
So it bothered me. But you have a score?
Score. Okay, I'm giving this a 4.1.
Wow.
It's slightly over a 4.
Yeah, just because in the canon of our podcast, Megalopolis I gave a 4, and I can't give it lower than Megalopolis, so I'm giving it 1 over.
It's slightly better than Megalopolis.
I gave my score in the non-spoiler, but yeah, I think that it's a mess of a movie, and I think there's a lot in there that could have worked better, and there were certain things that were effective, but it didn't overall lead to a great end product, and that's why I am going to give this very middling 5 out of 10 as my final score for Joker FOLIE A DEUX. Liz, what says you?
I also gave my score in the non-spoiler review, but I clearly did not hate it as much as you guys did. I don't think it's an incredible movie, but I definitely think that I have seen worse this year and like prior. I also think, and I said this before, I think it's something new. I didn't feel like I'd seen this film before or this artistic take. And so I always appreciate when somebody is kind of throwing like paint against the wall and is like, all right, I don't know if this is going to work, but like, let's see how this goes and how audience take to it rather than making cookie cutter films. So I'm giving this a solid 6.
All right. Well, that has been our full spoiler review and discussion on Joker Folie à Deux. Let us know in the comments what your guys' thoughts on the film were. Did you guys like the first movie and not like this one? Or maybe the opposite of that? Or maybe you didn't like both? Or maybe you liked both? Definitely let us know. We'd love to have a conversation with you guys in the comments. And if you guys can, subscribe to us. We're the Culture Wave Media Network. We have a bunch of things also on all social media. You guys can check that stuff out below me in the video as well as in the description. And we have a lot of other stuff upcoming for you guys. So be sure to check that out if you can. Just signing off, I am Darian Scalamoni.
I am Liz Seiko.
And I'm Vinny Albano.
And we'll see you guys next time.
This is The Culture.